our channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Anshula, and today we are diving into all of my summer book recs. These books feel like sunset swims and beach house trips, lake picnics, and friend dates. A few of these stories are set in cozy sleepaway camps, but I think I'll start with the beach reads. To me, beach reads are books I can slip into my pull tote or beach bag, spend hours binging with summer gusts and crashing waves as metronomes. When I think of summer love, I think of 7 Days in June, a second chance romance set in the growing heat of New York City. Eva Mercy and Shane Hall first met in high school. They were just teenagers then, bruised and broken and full of hurt. So they burned like wildfires, all toxic fumes and obsessive flames. Then 15 years of silence. Both Eva and Shane are writers now, sparks still dancing between them, but love should never cut, so they take 7 summer days to figure out if they can forge a relationship based on adult maturity, healthier boundaries, and a stable sort of kindness, free from the traumas, addictions, and codependencies of their pasts. Tia Williams' writing is electric, pop culture witty, and perfectly summer sultry. The Beach by Alex Garland is another one of my all-time favorite beach reads. It's an anti-backpacker story told with a wolfish energy. Richard arrives in Thailand on the Banana Pancake Trail, a tourist route so well worn, most buildings are guest houses and Hollywood movies play in cafes. Richard has this maddening and intense appetite for newness, for the exoticisms he craves as a Western backpacker. And so he searches with a French couple, Francois and Etienne, for the beach, a paradise, a utopia, a lagoon, and commune. Alex Garland's novel takes the dark underbelly of a Western backpacker's mindset and just slices it open, so these drops of idealism, desire, and superiority bleed into Richard's dialogue. The Beach is a spilled guts, convulsing confessions sort of story. Richard and so many of the people in his tiny little orbit are overwhelmingly selfish. Richard is the everyman 1990s Western backpacker. He's travel greedy, but unwilling to learn the basics of Thai. Even in a land where he is the foreigner, he expects locals to assimilate to his needs. And when he finds that idyllic island, he is surrounded by other Westerners. The Beach is all the little hypocrisies of backpacking and traveler, not tourist culture in 400-ish pages, tight and taut with tension, with characters who frequently slack off, but a pace that never truly does. I was on my way back home from the Smoky Mountains last week, and I stopped in a random small city cafe, and the barista was a quarter of the way through Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I also just remembered that my local barista and my local florist are reading Funny Story right now, which I think is Emily Henry's latest release. I feel like ever since Beach Read was published, I've seen Emily Henry's name everywhere, splayed out on coffee shop counters and behind registers and on picnic blankets. Emily Henry romances are so many people's happy place. Her writing is confident and assertive with little lines of humor. And although Happy Place is far from my personal favorite Emily Henry book, the ending just really irked me. This was such a fun summer read with messy friendships and messier loves. Harriet and Wynn's second chance romance takes place in a coastal cottage in Maine. Their yearly getaway with an old group of best friends is days of lobster rolls and fine wine, naughty wood boards, and echoing laughter. But one year, the sea air feels sharper and the walls closer as Harriet and Wynn fake date to avoid saying what feels unsayable to their friend group. They broke off their engagement months ago. They aren't getting married, love is lost, and Harriet isn't really sure of her happy place anymore. If I made a playlist for this book, it would be Cruel Summer, The Last Great American Dynasty, and Champagne Problems. If you loved Front Desk by Kelly Yang and Amal Unbound by Aisha Syed, I think you'll really like In the Key of Us by Mariama J. Lockington. In the Key of Us is a lyrical, dual perspective camp story about Andy and Zora, 2 girls grieving one mourning the loss of her mother and the other the loss of her childhood. Andy and Zora are cabin mates. Most everyone expects them to be instant friends because they are the only 2 Black instrumentalists at Harmony, a competitive, prestigious music camp in Michigan. But Andy and Zora have clashing personalities and upbringings and insecurities, so their harmonization happens slowly over time spent in their cabin, a chat on a kayak, and an emotional conversation by a haunted lake. In the Key of Us is is a sweet summer camp romance, a middle grade on the cusp of a YA where substantive themes like grief and displacement are navigated gently. Give Me a Sign by Anna Sortino is another summer camp story I read recently. When Lila was younger, she went to Grey Wolf, a welcoming and inclusive summer camp for the deaf and blind. As a teen, Grey Wolf fills Lila with a sense of nostalgia, so she becomes a camp counselor there. Lila is hard of hearing, and her family wants her to adjust to the hearing world in ways that benefit them, not quite asking what Lila wants or needs for herself. So Grey Wolf feels like a haven, a place where Lila can practice American Sign Language and open up a new avenue of communication that feels personal and expressive for her. Like so many young adult contemporaries, Give Me a Sign is a self-acceptance story. There's an insta-crush, the typical will they or won't they teenage woes, very clear-cut antagonists, two lifeguards who don't add anything to the plot and are just there to be British boys in a summer romance. But the camp atmosphere in Give Me a Sign truly shines, and I feel like Anna Sortino's passion for educating people on the everyday struggles of the deaf community and how those struggles range along the deaf spectrum really came across on page. And I love that there's a cute YA contemporary centered around a deaf main character, a deaf love interest, and several deaf side characters. Ray Bradbury's Dandelion Wine is small town summer at its highest and lowest, a story in series of stories connected by Little Greentown, Illinois, and 12-year-old Douglas Spalding's memories of the summer of 1928. Douglas Spalding mirrors Ray Bradbury in ways that blur truths, so it took me a while to realize this wasn't a memoir, that much of the diary-like qualities of Dandelion Wine was fictionalization. Ray Bradbury distills summer into the prettiest prose. I'll just read you the first line. It was a quiet morning, the town covered with darkness and at ease in bed. Summer gathered in the weather, the wind had the proper touch. The breathing of the world was long and warm and slow. You had only to rise, lean from your window, and know that indeed this was the first real time of freedom and living. This was the first morning of summer. The rest of this book is just a summary. It's all summertime, bottled, aged, uncorked, and spilled onto fleeting moments, tiny joys, that feeling of being alive, old loves, fears, changes, and wishful thinking. My next summer book rec is The Year of the Hare by Arto Paasilinna. One summer day, a journalist, Vatanen, is sitting in the passenger seat of a car when the driver, a photographer, and Vatanen's colleague hits a young hare. Vatanen leaps out of the passenger seat. He bounds into a Finnish forest after the hare. The hare is Vatanen's wake-up call. Vatanen wants more from his life, and in this moment, he realizes just how desperately he wants more. So he ditches his job, his wife, his life, and he runs off to the Finnish countryside, romping and playing hooky for about a year. The Year of the Hare is a modern fable that in some ways felt escapist and slapstick comedic, and in other ways felt bizarrely comforting. After reading this book, I began to feel like there is a wild way to hop out of a situation, no matter how in a corner I feel. A lot of my enjoyment of this berserk little novella stemmed from Pico Iyer's introduction. Sometimes I skip intros while reading books because they overshare the plots, but this one in particular, as spoilery as it was, prepared me for the shenanigans, the sheer over-the-top rush of events, the weirdness of Vatanen's adventures, the disjointedness, the fragmented shards of storytelling, and the odd dialogue that sometimes felt reminiscent of Catch-22. The humor in The Year of the Hare is quite slapstick and cringy, but I loved how Vatanen's movements always meant something. The Year of the Hare is a story that is always in motion, and when I picture this book as a movie, I like it best. There are two adaptations, a 1970-something Finnish film and a 2006 French-Bulgarian movie that I have not watched, but I am interested in seeing whichever one has English subtitles this summer. Those are all of my summer book recs. Let me know what book you are most excited to read this summer. What book is at the top of your TBR? It can be any genre. I just really enjoy reading your recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. Bye guys!